Hey guys, we're going to look at a speech from Stephen A. Douglas. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that on here before we get going, just so we're very clear on who Senator Douglas was. Stephen A. Douglas. Okay, so just for a little background before we get going, Stephen A. Douglas was a politician from Illinois who, I guess for some quick background, without getting too far, he kind of took over as the great compromiser. So when you think back to the early 19th century, or I guess early mid-19th century, you probably always think about, some people probably always think about Henry Clay. In some ways, Stephen A. Douglas was like the new Henry Clay. Henry Clay was the great compromiser. He was always trying to make sure that both the North and South could get along. And Stephen A. Douglas really kind of became that. As Henry Clay got old and eventually passed away, Stephen A. Douglas kind of carried that torch forward. And he was a Democrat from Illinois. And Democrat at that time, as a Democrat at that time, a lot of his base, a lot of the people who supported him would have been really in favor of slavery. And Douglas was from a northern state, but he was a Democrat, and so he was always trying to get these two sides to get along. And so when you think back to like the Compromise of 1850, he was really instrumental in that. He was instrumental in Kansas, Nebraska. He was really instrumental in what we call popular sovereignty. And that idea, and what popular sovereignty was the idea that people of each state should be able to decide whether or not they have slavery or not. And so that's a little bit about Stephen A. Douglas. He ran for president in the election of 1860, but he lost. He really barely won anything. I know he won Missouri. I wish I could remember what else he won, but this is a reminder that I don't know everything. But most states either went for Lincoln, or they went for John Breckinridge, who was the secessionist candidate, or they went for John Bell, who was the Union Party candidate. So at this point, Douglas is giving a speech before the Legislature of Illinois. This is April 25th, 1861. We're going to see some context really quickly that is going to bring us back to that date, and we'll figure out what has happened in the meantime, or in close proximity to that date. But Douglas was a Democrat. He had a lot of Democratic supporters, I guess, for lack of a better word. But he also was a very staunch Unionist, which meant as Southern states started to secede over slavery, Douglas basically became a defender of the Union. There's like a quote that he gave that once whenever he was talking to Abraham Lincoln, once it was clear that he was going to lose the presidential election, he went south because he wanted to save the Union. Okay, all right. I said that was going to be brief. That was 3 minutes. Okay, we're going to move forward into his speech that he delivered to the Legislature of Illinois. So this is occurring in the state of Illinois. In compliance with the joint resolution of the two houses, which means that we've got both the Senate and the House of Representatives from Illinois in the presence of Stephen A. Douglas. The joint session of the legislature having assembled in the hall of the House of Representatives, Senator Douglas, accompanied by several friends, entered at 7:45. Mr. Speaker Cullum then introduced him to the legislature. Mr. Douglas said, okay, now here are his words. Mr. Speaker and gentlemen of the Senate and House of Representatives, I am not insensible to the patriotic motives which have prompted you to do me the honor to invite me to address you on this is a fun sentence, on the momentous issues now presented in the condition of our country. With a heart filled with sadness and grief, I proceed to comply with your request. So this should make us make our eyebrows raise up a little bit. Why is he sad? I'm going to put sad, question mark. Why? What's going on? Why is Stephen A. Douglas sad? For the first time since the adoption of the federal Constitution, A widespread conspiracy exists to destroy the best government the Son of Heaven ever shed its rays upon. So something is working against the U.S. government. Wonder what that could be. I'm going to put CSA, Confederate States of America. Hostile armies are now marching upon the federal capital with a view of planting a revolutionary flag upon its dome. That'd be the Confederate flag. Seizing the National Archives, taking captive the president elected by the votes of the people. Who's that? That's Lincoln. And he's reinforcing, how did he get elected? By the votes of the people. It's the way we've always done things. And holding him in the hands of secessionists and disunionists. A war of aggression and of extermination is being waged against the government established by our fathers. The boast has gone forth by the authorities of this revolutionary government that on the first day of May, the revolutionary flag shall float from the walls of the Capitol at Washington, and that on the 4th day of July, the rebel army shall hold possession of the Hall of Independence in Philadelphia. So, I can't verify that these things are, that they were being said. Someone might be able to. Someone probably would be able to. But what he's basically saying is the South is saying, hey, we're going to conquer the North. Like, this is, we're going to take over this country. That's at least what Douglas is saying. You got to keep in mind where he's coming from. He's coming from the North. He is a unionist. And so, there might be some bias there, but at least it sounds like there was some pretty big boasts being sent out there by southern states, southern leaders. The simple question presented to us is whether we will wait for the enemy to carry out his boast of making war upon our soil. Well, I'm guessing that's northern soil is what he's referring to. Or whether we will rush as one man to the defense of the government and its capital and defend it from the hands of all assailants who have threatened to destroy it. Great enthusiasm. People are pretty fired up. Already, I'm going to mess up this word, piratical flag has been unfurled against the commerce of the United States. Okay, so what's that mean? The flag's already been basically raised against the commerce. Remember, this is the Confederate flag raised against commerce. I wonder what that means. I'm going to do this a lot. Letters of marque have been issued appealing to the pirates of the world to assemble under that revolutionary flag and commit depredations on the commerce carried on under the stars and stripes. Well, this is interesting because we just had this question and it seems like Douglas is starting to answer it. That it sounds like what the South was doing is they were enlisting pirates, like pirates, to capture and steal and seize Union ships, any type of shipping vessel. The navigation of our great river into the Gulf of Mexico is obstructed. Okay, so it sounds like there's something going on down at New Orleans that's not allowing Union or government ships to access the Mississippi River. And that's what this is. I'm going to go ahead and put MS River. Hostile batteries have been planted upon its banks. Customs houses have already been established, and we are required now to pay tribute and taxes without having a voice in making the laws imposing them, or having a share in the proceeds after they have been collected. The question is whether this war of aggression shall proceed, and we remain with folded arms, inattentive spectators, or whether we shall meet the aggressors at the threshold and turn back the tide of revolution and usurpation. And so what's he saying here? He's basically saying southern states have set up new customs houses and fortifications along the Mississippi River that are demanding payment. And the government never approved these new customs houses. It's basically just the South, in a sense, kind of stealing from the commerce of the country. All right. So long as there was hope, remember what we said about him. He kind of took up the mantle for Henry Clay, who was the great compromiser. So long as there was a hope of peaceful solution, I prayed and implored for compromise. I can appeal, So just see, I already wrote this out here. Compromise of 1850. This guy was like the king of compromises after Henry Clay. Tried to make it work. I can appeal to my countrymen with confidence that I've spared no effort, omitted no opportunity to secure a peaceful solution of all these troubles, and thus restore peace, happiness, and fraternity to this country. When all propositions of peace fail and a war of aggression is proclaimed, there is but one course left for the patriot, and that is to rally under that flag which has waved over the Capitol from the days of Washington and around the government established by Washington, Madison, Hamilton, and their compeers. Great cheering. So what's he saying? Essentially, he's saying, South, I tried to work with you. But now I'm supporting the Union, I guess. There's probably a better way to describe that, but that's what I'm going to say. The same Union of the Founding Fathers. And we'll talk about this a lot. In the Civil War, it's no different from today. Both sides try to enlist like, hey, we're doing what the Founding Fathers wanted. But Douglas is saying, and this is really indisputable, like, I'm going to support the country that's existed since these guys. What is the alleged cause for this invasion of the rights and authority of the government of the United States? The cause alleged, so why is it that the South is becoming the aggressor? The cause alleged is that the institutions of the southern states are not safe under the federal government. We've talked about this a lot too. What's an institution of the southern state that might not be safe under the federal government? Slavery. What evidence has been presented that they are insecure? I appeal to every man within the sound of my voice to tell me at what period, from the time that Washington was inaugurated down to this hour, have the rights of the southern states, the rights of the slaveholders, been more secure than they are at this moment? When in the whole history of this government have they stood on so firm a basis? For the first time in the history of this republic, there is no restriction by act of Congress upon the institution of slavery anywhere within the limits of the United States. Then it cannot be the territorial question that has given them a cause for rebellion. When was the fugitive slave law executed with more fidelity than since the inauguration of the present incumbent of the presidential office? Let the people of Chicago speak and tell us, when were the laws of the land executed with as much firmness and fidelity, so far as the fugitive slaves are concerned, as they are now? Can any man tell me of any one act of aggression that has been committed or attempted since the last presidential election that justifies this violent disruption of the federal union? So basically he's saying, hey, slaveholders, we're enforcing the fugitive slave law. I'm going to put fugitive slave law, check. And also, what else? We're not committing violence against you guys. Lincoln was elected. No violence committed against South. I ask you to reflect. This is kind of interesting because this is like what Lincoln was saying too. It seems like reflection's important. That might be a good life lesson from Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. I ask you to reflect and then point out any one act that has been done, any one duty that has been omitted to be done, of which any one of these disunionists can justly complain. Yet we are told simply because a certain political party has, I wish I could, succeeded in a presidential election, they choose to consider that their liberties are not safe, and therefore they are justified in breaking up the government. So keep in mind this is from Douglas, but what's he say? Why is he saying the South seceded? They seceded because Lincoln was elected. Remember, Lincoln is the Republican candidate. The Republicans were largely an anti-slavery party. I had supposed that it was a cardinal and fundamental principle of our system of government that the decision of the people at the ballot box, the votes, without fraud, according to the forms of the Constitution, was to command the implicit obedience of every good citizen. Basically, hey, don't we follow elections? Isn't that the way it's supposed to work? If defeat at a presidential election is to justify the minority or any portion of the minority in raising the traitorous hand of rebellion against the constituted authorities, you will find the future history of the United States written in the history of Mexico. According to my reading of Mexican history, there has never been one presidential term from the time of the Revolution of 1820 down to this day when the candidate elected by the people ever served his 4 years. In every instance, either the defeated candidate has seized upon the presidential chair by the use of the bayonet, this is by force, or he has turned out the duly elected president before his term expired. Are we to inaugurate this Mexican system in the United States of America? No, never. That's what they yell. Suppose the case to be reversed. Suppose the disunion candidate had been elected by any means, I care not what, if by any means in accordance with the forms of the Constitution, at the last presidential election. Then, suppose the Republicans had raised a rebellion against his authority. In that sense, you would have found me tendering my best efforts and energies to John C. Breckinridge to put down the Republican rebels. Tremendous applause. And if you had attempted such a rebellion, I would have justified him in calling forth all the power and energies of this country to have crushed you out. Continued applause. What Douglas is basically saying is losers can't secede. So basically, this whole thing is basically saying, okay, you're really upset because you lost. Guess what? Lincoln was voted in. And so for you, he is the president. And he's going to oppose the South, but if it was reversed, he would oppose the North. If the Southern candidate had been elected, Douglas is saying, if the Republicans had said, that's it, we can't live in a country where John C. Breckinridge is president and we're going to leave. Douglas would have been saying the exact same thing to them. Hey, you can't leave. This is the way democracy works. This is who was elected. All right. The first duty of an American citizen, or of a citizen of any constitutional government, is obedience to the Constitution and laws of this country. Applause. I have no apprehension that any man in Illinois or beyond the limits of our own beloved state will misconstrue or misunderstand my motive. So far as any of the partisan questions are concerned, I stand in equal, irreconcilable, and undying opposition both to the Republicans and the secessionists. You all know that I am a very good partisan fighter in partisan times, laughter and cheers. And I trust you will find me equal as good a patriot when the country is in danger. What he's saying, a partisan would be like, partisan politics is when people are really Democrat or really Republican and they oppose each other really strongly across those party lines. And what he's saying is, hey, I've been that guy who will split with people because they're Republicans and I'm Democrat. But right now, country first. I'm a patriot. Now, permit me to say, to the assembled representatives and senators of our beloved state, composed of men of both political parties, in my opinion, it is your duty to lay aside for the time being your party creeds and party platforms, to dispense with your party organizations and partisan appeals, to forget that you were ever divided until you have rescued the government and the country from their assailants. When this paramount duty shall have been performed, it will be proper for each of us to resume our respective political positions according to our convictions of public duty. Give me a country first, that my children may live in peace. Then we will have a theater for our party organizations to operate upon. This is like almost like a rally cry right here. Like, who cares if you're a Democrat or Republican? Country, or we'll say union, first. Like, we've all got to be on the same team here as we weather this crisis. Are we to be called upon to fold our arms, allow the national capital to be seized by a military force under a foreign revolutionary flag, to see the archives of the government in the hands of a people who affect to despise the flag and government of the United States? I am not willing to be expelled by military force, nor to fly from the federal capital. I'm not going to run away. It has been my daily avocation, 6 months in the year, for 18 years, saying this has been his job, to walk into that marble building and from its portico to survey a prosperous, happy, and united country on both sides of the Potomac. It's the river that runs through D.C. I believe I may with confidence appeal to the people of every section of the country to bear testimony that I have been as thoroughly national in my political opinions and action as any man that has lived in my day. This is good because what's the talk of the politics of the day? that they're sectional. That means Southerners care about Southern causes, Northerners care about Northern causes. So if you're national, that's the opposite of sectional. And I believe if I should make an appeal to the people of the state of Illinois or of the northern states for their impartial verdict, they would say that whatever errors I have committed have been in leaning too far to the southern section of the Union against my own. Basically, hey, I've helped the South out too much if I've done anything. I think I can appeal to friend and foe. I use the term in a political sense, and I trust I use the word foe in a past sense. I can appeal to them with confidence that I have never pandered to the prejudice or passion of my section, which would be North or Illinois, against the minority section of this Union, and I will say to you now, with all frankness and in all sincerity, that I will never sanction nor acquiesce in any warfare whatever upon the constitutional rights or domestic institutions of the people of the southern states. So he's saying, what is the domestic institution? Remember, slavery. Acquiesce in any warfare upon the constitutional rights or domestic institutions of the people of the southern states. On the contrary, if there was an attempt to invade those rights, to stir up servile insurrection among their people, I would rush to their rescue and interpose with whatever of strength I might possess to defend them from such a calamity. While I will never invade them, while I will never fail to defend and protect their rights to the full extent that a fair and liberal construction of the Constitution give them, they must distinctly understand that I will never acquiesce in their invasion of our constitutional rights. Really, he's saying, hey, South, it's what you're doing right now in becoming the aggressor that's making me oppose you. If the North was trying to invade you, I would be opposing them. Like, I'm not some guy that's just out to destroy the South. I basically am a friend of the South, is what he's saying. It is a crime against the inalienable and indefeasible right of every American citizen to attempt to destroy the government under which we were born. It is a crime against constitutional freedom and the hopes of the friends of freedom throughout the wide world to attempt to blot out the United States from the map of Christendom. Yet this attempt is now being made. The government of our fathers is to be overthrown and destroyed. The capital that bears the name of the father of his country is to be bombarded and leveled to the earth among the rubbish and the dust of things that are past. The records of your government are to be scattered to the four winds of heaven. The constituted authorities, placed there by the same high authority that placed Washington and Jefferson and Madison and Jackson in the chair, are to be captured and carried off to become a byword and a scorn to the nations of the world. You may think that I am drawing a picture that is overwrought. No man who has spent the last week in the city of Washington will believe that I have done justice to it. Basically, he's saying the situation is worse than I'm painting. Keep in mind, Washington is a southern city. I mean, it's essentially in the South. Might be on the northern edge of the South, but it's in the South. So if there's like this angry feeling from southern people, it's going to be felt in D.C. You have all the elements of the French Revolution surrounding the Capitol now. That's like scary, because what happens in the French Revolution, people will get beheaded. It's like pretty violent. And threatening it with terrors. Not only is our constitutional government to be stricken down, not only is our flag to be blotted out, but the very foundations of social order are to be undermined and destroyed. He's using some big language here. The demon of destruction is to be let loose over the face of the land. A reign of terror and mob law is to prevail in each section of the Union, and the man who dares to plead for the cause of justice and moderation in either section is to be marked down as a traitor to his section. If this state of things is allowed to go on, how long before you will have the guillotine in active operation? That's hearkening back to that French Revolution. I appeal to you, my countrymen, men of all parties, not to allow your passions to get the better of your judgments. Do not allow your vengeance upon the authors of this great iniquity to lead you into, to lead you into rash, I'm